Okay, so we're on session number 6, and we are coming to the end of what I call the sort of taste and see segment, right? The objective of this was, for you to understand us to understand you, taste and see the particular, industry that what is it all about? How big is it? How does it function? How does it work? What are some of the high level elements of it? What are your interactions? It's also designed to dig into cultural stuff. Some of you guys did a lot of reflecting, a lot of visioneering, a lot of research, kind of looking around that, which is by design, not only for you to understand our culture, but also for you to understand you, right? That's really important for you guys as you're going through your college experience. You're trying to identify who am I, and what excites me, and where do I want to spend the rest of my days? Kind of building a career, and that's super important for you guys, and that's certainly our desire is to make sure that you guys end up exactly where you should be, and that's important because like I told you guys, as we go forward, is the greatest thing I can give you is just some knowledge of some wisdom stuff for you guys to take with you and go, okay, if I am trying to decide where I want to be, what do I want to ask? What do I want to look for? What's really important? What advice would you give me if you were in my spot, knowing what you know now? Those are the kinds of things you want to leave with, are greater than just a bunch of knowledge of school stuff, right? Because it's really going to impact you on, where you're going to end up, because you want to make sure you're in a healthy culture. That's super important. You want to make sure you're with the right leader who is going to take you in a specific direction on purpose. And then you want to be somewhere that really draws out your design of passion, something that excites you personally and that makes you go, yes, this is who I am, what I want to do, and it excites me. So, Chioma, we'll just start with you. Like, what were just some of the things that maybe you were insightful for you, or that you learned, or just love to start off? Maybe the answer is nothing, but that's fine too. But we'll start there. Besides the vacuum, what did you learn?
Oh gosh. Yeah, no, I learned quite a bit. Um, I think there's a lot of I'm thinking of a lot of terms and other things that are in this particular industry, but I think that it all comes down to bringing two groups of people together, people
Mhm,
who are looking for some sort of financing and people who have the financing.
mhm,
Um, and I think that it's a very intriguing industry in the sense that I think in the master's program, we're learning about the stock market and everything, and then the program kind of pushes you to do FP&A, which is financial planning or investment banking, or to be a stockbroker, I guess, where you're trying to tell your client that they should trust you with their money and you're going to try and get them a good return. Whereas in this industry, you can guarantee them a better term if you do your homework right, I guess. Um, and so it's not like it's not speculative. If you make enough relationships, you can connect two people perfectly, which is very interesting. But then there's all these other stuff, in the middle that you have to know and all these terms. But generally, I think that's the main idea.
mm.
And then depending on how much work you put in, you could be a better broker than another person.
Yeah, that's really good. I like the way you put that, right? Because you have these, two parties, right? And you're always asking the question of what is the value that you're bringing to the table? Because, it's like if you're just sort of connecting two people, that's not a whole lot of value there. You have to say, what are we bringing? We talked about the fact that we have intellectual knowledge, stuff that we can bring to the table, whether that's the connections we have and the access to capital that we have, or the consulting that we're able to help you as you proactively work through issues. And so you constantly have to be asking that question and challenging yourself to say, am I really adding value? Because that's what makes us and could be other people different. is they have a deep desire to say, I'm not just want to make a buck, but I really want to add value to you so that you feel, if I can't add value to somebody, I really try to pass on it, because it just doesn't seem like that's the right answer, at the end of the day. That could be some different areas for sure, depending upon where they're at. So that's a really great point, for sure. One of the things, as we move down the line here, but Chioma, one of the things I've noticed about you is you seem to me to have a deep desire to do things with excellence. I really noticed that about you. It stands out like a sore thumb in a good way. That you have this deep desire to want to do things with excellence. And I just want you to know, I really appreciate that because you're super sharp. And so thank you for offering me that. It's really been fun to kind of see how you do things. And it's not, you don't just do things on the whim, but you can tell that you really give thought to it. So just want you to know that.
Thanks, Dave.
Austin, what did you learn?
So one of the biggest things that I have highlighted in my notes is people don't really buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And I feel like in the beginning, when we learned about our mission and our values, that really all tied together when we started talking about they don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it. And, learning about the industry and stuff like that, it's been super cool to see, like, even the very last assignment, which was, reflecting on what you would say to a client and how you could pitch it to them and different things like that. I thought it all came together and kind of like what you were talking about, how can you bring value to other people? Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And so that was probably one of the biggest things that I learned throughout, all of this, was just, you have to know what your why is, or you're not gonna be able to sell anything.
Yeah, that's a great thing to walk away from because it's applicable wherever you go. And by the way, it's, you can't adopt it. I suppose you can borrow it from, I think a lot of things we do is we're adopters for a while, right? Trying to figure out, okay, that seems to make sense to me, but eventually, you have to own it. Something has to become really yours, and it has to become part of your core and who you are. And that's when things really go from black and white to Technicolor, right? Just start to really go, okay, wow, that's, this is my why. This is what drives me and fuels me. And that does take a lot of thinking and reflection and takes time. And because, one of the journeys for you guys is this idea, and it sounds kind of silly, but it's probably one of the most powerful things you'll develop is self-awareness. And just really becoming self-aware of, like, okay, is that, really who I am? Or is this really what I need to be doing? Or does this make sense? Or should I be here? Or is this healthy or unhealthy? And so developing that characteristic of self-awareness is huge, especially in the day and age we have now when everything is just so fast and furious and things are just moving so quick. That's why I think a lot of the reasons why depression is so high. Things are going so fast and people are overloaded with information. They don't have margin to slow down and think. So I would just definitely keep encouraging you to press into that why. And one of the things I've noticed about you, Austin, that I've really appreciated has been you have probably a natural sense of curiosity about you. And I've noticed that pretty consistently. It was like, I'm always thinking about that. And I'm like, you're very curious. I can tell you lean into things, you're thinking about things, you're curious about what's going on. And so I just want you to know I noticed that. And I just want you to remember that, just because that'll serve you really well. I remember when I went to a retreat on a board retreat, and they did this word picture thing where they would have literally, it was like 300 words that every board member had to go through and choose all the words that were applicable for each person. Nobody knew what they were choosing, but then they would bring it all up, and the word that was most picked by everybody would be your word that kind of showed up at the highest. And I remember when they went around and did mine, and I'll be honest, when they first did it, I was mad. I was like, well, that's stupid. Like what, and as I got time to think about it, I was like, oh, that really is me. And it was thoughtful. And, was the biggest word. And, and at first when I heard it, I was like, well, that's useless, right? And yet it isn't. And I've been able to use it in almost every area of my business. And so, just take these things and apply them and just know that they are, kind of how God made you and gave you specific things and you can use it. So,
Okay. Thank you.
absolutely. Riley, what about you? What have you learned in your time with us, would you say?
Well, well, I think kind of two very different things. Like the first unit, I was kind of caught off guard by kind of what we were learning. And it was good though, because like I'd never really take the time to kind of like think about like what my, core convictions are and take the time to think about like what values I have and why I have them. So kind of like looking back kind of on myself and my actions and thinking about all that was really good. Because I agree with what Austin said, is kind of like you need to know yourself before you can, go and sell something, because people buy based off like you and your values. And the second unit, really interesting to learn kind of like high level, kind of front to back end of the industry and kind of know all the different characters involved, because there's a bunch of them. And so that way, if you have that like high level understanding, you can be able to like pinpoint kind of where to fix an issue and know who to go to at least if an issue arises. So I thought that was pretty valuable. So I kind of two totally different kind of things I learned in kind of very different units, but I enjoyed it.
That's great. That's awesome. Well, yeah, it's good to kind of put all these things together and help you get a high level on things. And one of the things just in our time, Riley, that I've noticed about you is that there's kind of two things. You're what I'd say likable, right? You're a very likable guy. That sounds silly at first, but you are, but also intellectual. I've seen some of the work and things you put together, and there's just an interesting amount of just intellect that you have. I could tell you're a student by nature, and you like to learn, and you're almost just kind of curious for knowledge, and you're always wanting to learn new things. And I know that you and I spoke on the phone, and you're still trying to figure out like what is exactly, am I the front end guy or the back end guy? Where am I going to land? But wherever it is, it's you're going to do really, really well, because you're just you just have a lot of intellect, and obviously you're a likable guy, which will take you real far. So
Thank you.
For sure. So that's what I kind of see in you, for sure. Many more things, but this is just top of the list. Okay, Z man. I'm not going to say dog, but I'll just say Z. How's that sound?
Yeah, for lesson one, it was really cool to do a deep dive into all the values and everything about the company, and then also learn about myself, like they all said before. And then for lesson two, I was really cool because I didn't know much going into it, and like all the different types of people that are part of the process and their specific processes. And yeah, I just thought that was interesting to learn all the different people that kind of help you create and do all the things that to get you into the end.
Yeah, it's good. Yeah, just all the different elements that go into what really gets produced at the end of the day. It's a lot of work. There's a lot of hands involved, and there's a lot of people involved, and that's a good thing, but also makes it kind of messy, because there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen. So sometimes things get confused and communication gets broken down. So it's a good point. And for you, Zach, I would say that you are a man of action. I've watched you, and I don't know if you have anything inside of you that says procrastination, because you get things done. Like, you're a man of action. You don't want to sit on your hands. You want to move, and you want to move fast, and you want to get things done. And that's going to serve you really, really well, especially I think in the sales world, because you're not going to sit around and wait. You're going to literally move and take action, and not just wait for something to happen. That's a huge character trait that, in fact, I was talking to a guy today, and I said, when I sat in front of a bunch of college students, I remember saying, if you can do these simple things, you'll be extremely successful. And most of you are going to think they're dumb. And I said, it's if you return the phone call expediently, preferably the same day, if you come prepared to your meetings, and if you follow up with what you say you're going to do. And I said, if you do those three things, you'll literally stand out like a sore thumb because nobody does it. It's just very rare. The guy I was meeting with today said there's always that 80-20 rule where 20% of the people do 80% of the work. He said, now I think it's down to like 95, right? Like it doesn't take that much for you to stand out. So, so I think that's a great trait that you have. It's been fun for me to kind of watch. So thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Carlson, the golfer extraordinaire. What did you learn?
Yeah, so I'll be honest, at first I figured that the lesson 2 would be the majority of everything we do. I was not expecting the lesson 1 thing. But I think when you look at it from a holistic approach afterwards, when you start doing those lesson 1 things, you start learning about yourself and learning about like your key values, your core convictions. And then like wrapping up today with the who you work with, like how you're going to work with them. You kind of see that the internal part of you, who you are as a person, is super important in this industry. Because if you are not around and like conducting these sort of financial activities with people that you don't like, it's never going to go well. Like you have to develop this trust with you, the third party vendors, the borrower, the lenders, and kind of incorporating that all together and being your true self is like super important. And that's going to take you far and meet more and more people and ultimately lead you to success.
Yeah, it's good. It's true. You have to be really discerning about who you're going to work with and who you're not. That's what I tell my guys all the time is you're in the business of disqualifying people, not qualifying them, because you have to be real careful about who you're spending your time with. It's really, really important. And so, because there's only so much time that we have, and so you want to manage it well. And so that's very, very true, for sure. And so, Ben, my time with you has been fun. I remember when I first got off the phone with you when I interviewed you, and I was like, this guy's amazing. He's literally like I guess the way I've described it is you're like a natural born salesman. And there's something about you that makes you want to buy from Ben. It's just, you probably have what I call the acceleration trust factor. And where people probably trust you pretty quick. They can connect with you pretty fast, and that will serve you really well, in your life and career and all those things. And so it's been fun to get to know you and just spend some time with you. So just want to let you know that's what I've seen, amongst other things as well.
I appreciate that, Dave. Thank you.
So, Michelle, I know I went through a bunch of stuff. I don't know if you have any other comments before we move on to content, but.
Yeah, I mean, I learned something. It wasn't so much that I learned it. It was just so much, it just really exemplified the fact that linking yourself up with somebody that knows how to prioritize their own life is so crucial. And so I just feel like as you guys go out into the world and try and find your first job or your first big job, make sure the person that you are hired under is just really balanced in their life. They leave time for the things that make sense to leave time, where they don't, die at the altar of working all the time. They don't, spend too much time with their family and leave you to all the work, like they just have a really healthy balance with it. Because I think I've seen both ends of the spectrum and they're both really hard. So to link your bandwagon onto somebody that's super balanced, I think is so valuable. And it really, at the end of the day, gives you peace of mind because you're able to have your priorities shifted into the right place. And honestly, like Dave has helped me manage my priorities even in my life better than I did before working for him. So they can even help you manage your priorities in your life more. So anyway, this whole idea of managing priorities has just been on my heart recently. And I was just like, wow, it's just so true. So. Yeah,
that's really good. Yeah, it's really good. And you guys are very blessed to have Michelle just engaged. Obviously, you may not have had as much front interaction, but she is just an absolute delight to have with us because she cares so much about people. She pours out so well, and she's extremely intelligent. So she's very bright, and we're very blessed to have her part of the organization. So she's the glue that keeps us all together. So very
Thank
thankful.
you, Dave.
Okay, well, let's talk about the boring stuff. So let's talk about hard money or private lenders. Okay, so when you think about a hard money or a private lender, do you guys want to take some stabs at things you learned about these types of lenders?
So what I took away was that they're asset-based lenders. So they really, to an extent, don't really care about your credit history or anything of that such, unless like you said, the credit mortgage fraud guy. But yeah, they care more about the asset, and it's more of a short-term deal. You're looking anywhere from like 3 to 4 years, and you're just kind of getting a capital influx to help support the business in that time to lead to growth later on.
Yeah, absolutely. You hit the nail on the head. Asset-based lending, what we mean by that is that they're predominantly focused on the collateral that they're going to take as a lien. Okay, so they're going to take a lien interest on the collateral. So that means they're going to spend a bunch of time asking the question, is this worth what you're telling me? Okay, so if somebody comes in with a $2 million asset and they want 70% of that as a loan, then the first thing you're going to do, if you're a hard money lender, is start really doing some homework, calling brokers, looking around, driving the site to say, is that building really worth $2 million? And you're probably even asking a different question. You're probably asking, well, is that building worth $2 million if I foreclose on it and take it back and have to fire sell it in 5 days? That's really the question that they're asking, is if I have to foreclose on this because I'm not really looking at you, I'm looking at the asset. I don't want to hold on to the asset. So I'm going to have to own it. And then could I fire sell it and get out from under this and pay the investors back and get it? That's the real major question somebody's asking. It's kind of like if all of a sudden somebody says, well, I've got 70 acres of ranch land in the middle of nowhere. That's going to get a little scary for people, because they're going to go, well, if you're in the middle of nowhere and it's ranch land, how many people want the ranch land? Probably not many. So I'm probably not going to be able to sell it. If I do, I'm going to have to take a massive discount in order to do so. So there's just a lot of questions around the value and liquidation value of that land or asset, building, whatever you want to call it. And it's predominantly short term. Now, why do you think it's short term? What do you guys think? Why doesn't somebody want to hang out with that loan for a long time?
The rates are pretty high. I think they can be up to like 15%. And so it's going to cost you a lot. And so I think it's kind of like a last resort loan. And that's why it's kind of a short-term deal.
Yeah, it's expensive. It's like, why would I want to hang on to this 12, 13% loan for a long time? The answer is you don't. It is accomplishing something that gets you from here to here. Does that make sense? You're trying to go, I got to close in this time period. I'm going to close fast. It gets me the asset, and then I get to move on and then take this out once I do some work to it. So there is certainly a purpose behind it, and it accomplishes something, but you don't want to hold on to it for a long term. It's not meant to hold on to for long term at the end of the day. Okay. And these are the kinds of things that you want to be aware of in the private money world. The beauty is, if you're the one doing a bunch of these, is you don't have to wait a long time to get paid. If you do a private money loan, it's going to get done in like probably 5 to 10 days. Versus if you do a traditional commercial loan, it's going to take you 60 to 90. Okay, so the time period is very short. for you in order for you to make your money. So that's certainly a positive thing for sure. The difficulty thing on this is that they're high risk. So that means there's some funky things that could be going on. I remember I funded in-house about a $2 million loan that the guy had this piece of land on the west side that was about 70 acres. And it was, I think he had been involved in like 4 different lawsuits. And it took me, and I'm not kidding, it took me 2.5 weeks to dig through all of the attorney paperwork to figure out what was going on. Because what I was scared about was whether I was going to get in the middle of a firestorm, where there's a bunch of lawsuits flying back and forth, and I just didn't want to get caught in the middle of something that would be detrimental. We obviously ended up closing because everything was settled, but they're usually messy. There's a reason why somebody's coming and saying they need to borrow 12% money. Okay, it's not because everything's going well. So you have to be very discerning on those things. That's why we don't do a ton of them, because I would say about 8 out of the 10 loans we'll see that end up being private money make me nervous, right? Either the person makes me nervous or something about it just makes me say, probably not. We're not going to do that. Or they're crazy about what they think the valuation is. Right? I think it's worth, everybody thinks their baby's the prettiest baby. But, So that's kind of private money. Again, short-term, asset-based, probably looking at maybe some small few things. There's not a lot of paperwork, and something to be short-term. And there's a ton of those people out there, tons of them. They're all over the place. And so they serve a purpose for sure. Okay, any questions or comments about hard money lending at all? Okay. All right, what about bridge lending? Bridge lenders, who wants to take a crack at the bridge lenders?
I think this one is also kind of a short-term loan. And I think what I've read was it bridges the gap between selling your home and buying a new one, or like a permanent loan versus a construction loan, I guess, if you wanted to do like a renovation or something. And this one, I think the rates are higher as well than like a normal conventional loan or bank loan.
Yeah, that's correct, Gielma. It's short-term by nature, meaning it's probably 24 to potentially 5 years. Depends on the project. These are usually larger by nature. They're typically going to be, call it 5 million plus that you're dealing with these types of loans. You're probably running into, like somebody who's buying an apartment complex. Tons of that going on all the time, where it's old and dilapidated and run down. They're going to buy it and slowly turn over units. Okay. Spend money to clean it up, get the new kitchen and, new floors, new paint, new doors, things like that. Turn the unit over, take the rent and jack it up, $200 a month. Do that across the board. And then what they're doing is lifting the valuation, okay, by doing so. And then what they're going to do is the intention is they'll refinance you out of the bridge loan or sell it, one of the two. Now, there was a ton of these going on over the last 5 years, and people were getting like 80% loan to cost, super high leverage. Rents were really expensive and high, and everybody was, super encouraged about what was going on, because rental rates, as you guys well know, are going through the roof. Tough to find places. Everything's expensive, which is why we're here now with Mr. Powell trying to get us to 2%. But ultimately, what is happening is that now those projections are not the same. And they just borrowed X amount of dollars, and they had X amount of interest reserve that's burning off. And now they're kind of stuck, either having to come in with more equity to right size the loan. They're having to take the loan out. So a lot of people do these bridge loans expecting to renovate and refi or sell But that's assuming the market is still there. If the market all of a sudden changes, now you're stuck, okay, with a really expensive loan that you can't get out of, okay? These are non-recourse by nature, okay, remember, so there's no personal guarantees, except for, you guys remember what we said? Non-recourse with what? What are the things that the caveat is? Standard carve outs. Remember that? So if you have a non-recourse loan, you're going to have a standard carve out, which means they're carving out these things that are conditions by which you will have a recourse. So if all of a sudden there's fraud, okay, so if Austin wakes up and decides to cook the books, right? And all of a sudden they come back and say, well, too bad, so sad. You know, if things defaulted and they find out there was some books getting cooked, then that pierces the veil and they come after you personally, okay? And there's a couple of other things too, but they call them bad boy provisions, essentially. So they're non-recourse by nature. They're focusing on the assets, projection-based by nature. And they're usually going to be in the, you know, call it, usually was about 6 to, it's kind of funny because it's changed fast, but they used to be kind of 5 to 6%. Now 5 to 6% is low now. You know, I mean, now we're more in like the 8 to 10. I mean, just things have changed fast. So essentially they're floating by nature. They'll give you tenant improvements or improvements to do all the work to the property. So you'll do draws on those and start building out the facility. And then when you're done, you'll take them out, essentially. They'll close in 45 to 60 days. And there's a ton of them. I mean, I literally get calls almost, not anymore because everybody's freaking out right now, but you know, I get tons of calls all the time for bridge lenders that, hey, we do bridge lending. I'm like, you and everybody else. I understand that, but tell me about your program. Sounds like a kind of a talking parrot because I just hear the same thing all the time. So those are bridge loans. So any questions or comments about that?
So I guess,
How many lenders?
go.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, so I guess with like bridge lenders and hard money loans, so hard money loans are just a little more riskier with a higher interest rate. It's kind of the same principle in a way, but hard money is more asset based.
Yeah, a couple things. You're asking a great question. What are the distinctions?
Yeah.
Hard money lenders typically are doing smaller loans. That'd be the first distinction. They're typically doing smaller loans. They're typically closing a lot faster than a bridge lender. Bridge lenders 45 days, maybe 30. Hard money lenders are like 5 to 10 days, right? Super fast. They don't get reports. They don't order like, you know, appraisals and environmental reports and all these different things. They're just kind of like boom and go. And so that's another distinction, I would say, for sure. And yes, the rates tend to be higher because again, they're dealing with just a different echelon borrower type, probably less sophisticated. You know, somebody that just kind of was like, hey, you know, don't know the first thing, but they just kind of look at the collateral and go, okay, well, that's fine. So yeah, good question. Chioma, you had a question.
Yeah, no, that was, I was gonna ask about hard money lenders as well. Do they ever provide bridge loans?
They do. Yeah, there's hard money lenders that will actually come in and provide, you know, what I call good news dollars, where they'll give money to kind of clean up the property and make it look pretty. And but it's kind of hard because if there's a level of sophistication or understanding in the market, then it makes no sense. If all things being equal and somebody is equally knowledgeable, then they would look at hard money versus bridge and say, well, of course I'm going to do a bridge. It's just cheaper and it makes more sense. And they're set up for that. We obviously don't have equal knowledge, and some people do it out of ignorance. They just don't know better, and they might pay more. So,
So is your credit and different things like that a hard money lender wouldn't look at? Does that come into play with bridge lenders more?
yeah, I would say so. They definitely are going to look at credit where a hard money lender won't. I mean, they might, but it seems kind of silly. And I would say that they're going to look a lot at experience for a bridge lender. I mean, if one of you guys just kind of goes, I'm going to buy a property today, and they're just going to go, well, you could have the money, but if you don't have the experience, then too bad, so sad. They want to know that there's been some history and track record to have the ability to execute on what it is you're trying to do, because it is a heavy lift. I mean, trying to buy 50, 100 units and turn them is definitely an art. I mean, you got to be pretty strategic and have the team too. That's the other thing. I mean, you got to have your contractors in place and kind of know what you're doing. Otherwise, you're going to get stuck. I've seen that happen a couple times. Good questions. Any other questions about bridge loans? It's really fascinating industry too, and it's always around. I mean, you're never really going to get in a market where there's not necessarily bridge loans. People are always kind of turning deals over. Okay, so let's talk about third-party reports. What do we mean when we talk about a third-party report?
These are all like the additional parties needed to kind of get a deal finished and get the like proper value of the property in. So there's like appraisers, title escrow companies, environmental reports, property inspections. And then one that I didn't really think of until I saw the video was the termite inspections, but
Yeah.
definitely a major one.
Yeah, exactly. It's any and all parties that are involved in transacting that have a part in the due diligence. Okay, so property condition assessment report. Well, what do? Well, they come in and they look at the foundation, they look at the building. It's an engineer that is trying to decide whether this thing is going to fall to pieces or not, and when. They're trying to see, is the roof going to crack and fall to pieces or what? So it's definitely something that you need to have. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to somebody and they bought a property, and I asked them a question. I said, can you get me the phase 1 environmental report you did when you bought it? Which means that somebody has looked at the soil contamination history and decided if there's contaminants. And the people say, I never got one. I'm like, you bought a $2 million piece of property and you didn't want to spend $2,000 to get a phase 1 report. And oh, by the way, you bought something that had a bunch of gas tanks under it. So congratulations. So, and then you're stuck, because now that kind of jumping over pennies to get to dollars just bit you in the butt, because now you're stuck with this property you can't do anything with. No one's going to lend on it. So the reports are a big deal, and something to be aware of. But yeah, third-party reports, again, hard money lenders probably don't do any, but very few, all the way up to groups that do tons of reports. ALTA survey, property condition assessment, appraisal, phase 1 environmental report. I mean, the list goes on and on. You do CMBS, you'll literally pass out trying to figure out how many different reports they do. It's beyond me. They have somebody for everything in the CMBS. I remember Mackie works for us. She's like, I can't even keep track with how many people are involved in this transaction. I said, I know, it's too many people. So that's why it's so expensive. So third-party reports, not a ton to discuss, other than I can tell you right now that the appraisal is probably one of the most important. reports ever, because if you don't do your due diligence up front, that'll kill the whole deal. Because if all of a sudden you get the appraisal back and he's like, well, I thought it was this, and the appraiser's like, well, you're way off the mark, then the deal will die. Because, or people have to put in more money, because if the value doesn't come in, then you're up a creek, right, without a paddle. I've seen that happen. We obviously at our firm are very diligent about making sure we do the homework up front and make sure we're convinced that it's worth X. Because if we don't, then we just wasted their time and ours to go through the exercise to find out. So I always push for, we need to see comps. So something to be aware of.
How detailed would you say you guys need to know each thing? For example, like the appraisal, I saw there were a bunch of different approaches on how to to determine what the property's worth. How well do you guys need to know each document?
Yeah, it's a great question. We definitely are very knowledgeable about understanding how appraisals work, how they come to the conclusion, if they're going to use a cap rate, what kind, and how they're going to look at things on certain types of property. So I'd say you have to be pretty knowledgeable. And I would say that for us, what we do is we pull our own comps to make sure we're convinced. We also challenge those to say, do we really believe this? We make sure the broker's involved convincing us as well. And then the other thing we do is we have a whole list of things that we go through with the appraiser when they get the assignment. So most institutions that are regulated cannot order the appraisal themselves. They have to use a third party to do a blind bid to order 3 reports. And you can't know who it is. They just give you prices, and you just have to blind choose, because they think somehow that is a conflict. If you're trying to do a loan, that you would be in cahoots with them, trying to sway them to get a higher value. It's called FIREA, so the regulation that they have. So we are the ones that get contacted by the appraiser when they order it. And we go through a list of questions. And the first thing I ask them is, what was the assignment that you received? And you kind of go, well, that's a dumb question. Well, you'd be surprised about how many times they're like, well, I'm appraising this owner-occupied building. I'm like, it's not an owner-occupied building. It's an investment. So there's just, we have to make sure that the assignment was correct. And then the second question I ask is, have you ever done anything like this before? If all of a sudden it's a hotel, and this is Jim that's in Indiana and it's in Phoenix, and they've never done a hotel, then I kind of hit timeout and go, okay, we're going back to the drawing board, because I want to deal with somebody that has done hotels a bunch, knows what they're talking about, So, and then I just go through a list of questions, And by the way, what I'm listening for too, because you got to remember, it's an opinion of value. Sometimes you think appraisals are just a science. It's not. They take a bunch of stuff, and you and I could come back and come with a totally different value with the same information. So this isn't an exact science. So there's lots of little things that you have to work on. So I personally look for someone that is either reasonable or unreasonable. And I can tell within the first 2 minutes of the conversation. And if they're unreasonable and I feel like they're going to be kind of dogmatic, then we rebid it, because almost every time they'll kind of dig their heels in and say, nope, not going to take any feedback. It's like, okay. So we're very careful about how we go about, because someone can completely slaughter the deal if we're not cautious. So. Good questions. Any other questions about the third party reports? Not a ton to discuss, but need to know it nonetheless. What about the clients we work with? What did you guys learn about the clients we try to work with? Because again, this goes back to the idea we talked about of just picking people.
I mean,
I
kind of
really thought of like, oh, sorry, go ahead.
yeah, like my takeaway was kind of like always just kind of being the best person you can be. You never know who you're gonna run into. Like
Yep.
the importance of an indirect clients is kind of where I'm touching on. Like, I mean, obviously you're gonna work with your big dogs, your big companies, but you never know. You may run into a guy, strike a great conversation, talk about what you do, and that may be the reason for your next deal. So it's just kind of always being on your feet because you never know who you're gonna meet.
You never know who you're going to meet, and you never know who they're connected to, who could be a great client. I mean, I've had some clients, people that I've met that have connected me to huge clients that, you know, you would never think in a million years. So you always want to be on your best behavior and treat everybody equally. So it's a good thing. What else? What else did you learn?
Yeah, I was just gonna say the same thing. I never really thought of the concept of like an indirect client. But like another great point is like you never know who you're gonna meet. And so that was what kind of caught me the most off guard. I didn't really thought of it in that sense.
Yeah, I remember my coach that coached us with rugby for a long time. Was a fantastic coach. He used to say, well, the true test of your character is how you treat the CEO and the janitor. Did you treat him the same, or were you kind of a little bit more favoring to one, right? So you want to definitely just treat everybody with respect, and even if they're rude, that'll happen a lot. So that's why God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth, and He wants us sometimes to keep our mouth zipped, even when we want to say stuff. I've done the opposite too many times. It's not a good idea. So you just want to be discerning. You also want to be discerning who you're going to spend time with. So you just the kind of person that you feel comfortable representing, is the kind of transaction that you want to put on your website, right? You just have to be really selective because it'll either help you or hurt you. So just be really careful. That goes for anything in life, right? You want to be real careful about the people and the friends you choose in your life, because that'll mold you one way or another. And so obviously, and then our role in Integrity Capital, we talked about that, just kind of representing people, representing clients, looking for their best interest, walking away from things if you don't. So you just, the best advice I give people is just make decisions for the long term, and you'll make the best decisions. If you make short-term decisions, usually are not going to do it. Trying to make the quick buck, or just get that quick thing from the client, it's not a good idea. Just think long-term and you'll make a better decision. You'll give people good advice. You'll tell them when to walk away from things. I've had to do that a lot. People come in and I'm like, that's probably not a good idea. Should probably walk away from that. And sometimes they don't like it, but sometimes we know a little better than they do. So guys, that's it. So that kind of wraps, that's a wrap. And so from here, we're going to go